The digital clock on the observatory wall blinked to 17 a.m. as James adjusted the massive telescope. Sleep was a luxury he rarely indulged in these days. The night sky had always been his true companion, especially since his research grant had been cut and his colleagues had abandoned their shared project. Just a few more measurements, he mumbled to himself, scribbling notes about the unusual stellar phenomenon he'd been tracking for weeks. Nobody believed his theories about the strange light patterns from the Andromeda Quadrant, dismissing them as equipment malfunctions. A soft breeze drifted through the observatory, unusual considering all windows were sealed against light pollution. James shivered, attributing it to the building's ancient air conditioning system. The mountain observatory was remote enough that maintenance visits were rare. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice whispered from the shadows. James nearly knocked over his coffee mug as he spun around. Standing by the eastern wall was a woman he'd never seen before. Slender, with flowing dark hair that seemed to shimmer with an iridescent quality in the dim light. Her eyes reflected the starlight streaming through the dome in a way that seemed almost unnatural. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" James stammered, heart pounding. The facility was secured with keycard access, and he hadn't heard any doors open. The woman stepped forward with fluid grace. "I've been watching you watching the stars," she said, her accent impossible to place. "You've noticed something unusual, haven't you?" James instinctively placed his hand over his notes. "The observatory is closed to visitors." "You shouldn't be here," she smiled, a gentle expression that somehow made him lower his guard slightly. "My name is Lyra, and I'm not exactly a visitor." She walked directly to his desk, looking him in the eyes with an intensity that left him speechless. "Your calculations," she continued, glancing at his notes, "they're more accurate than you realize? You're an astronomer?" James asked, still trying to understand how she'd entered. Lyra's laugh was like distant wind chimes. "Something like that." She reached toward the star chart on his desk, her slender fingers tracing the constellation he'd been studying. "This pattern isn't random. How would you know that?" James challenged professional curiosity overriding his caution. Instead of answering, Lyra reached into her pocket and placed a small crystal-like object on his desk. It pulsed with a soft blue light that matched exactly the frequency he'd been recording from the distant star cluster. "What is that?" he whispered, transfixed. Lyra stepped closer until she was beside him. The subtle scent of something like jasmine but more exotic filled the space between them. "The answer to what you've been searching for," she said softly. "And I need your help, James." "How do you know my name?" he asked, realizing he'd never introduced himself. Lyra smiled again, this time with a hint of sadness. "I know many things about you. Your work, your isolation, your brilliance that others have ignored." She reached out, her hand hovering just above his. "The question is, are you willing to know more?" The crystal on James's desk pulsed rhythmically, casting ethereal blue patterns across the observatory walls. Lyra's eyes reflected the light, revealing flecks of violet that he hadn't noticed before. "What exactly is this?" James asked, gesturing to the crystal, fighting the urge to touch it. Lyra's expression turned solemn. "A beacon. And unfortunately, not just for me." She glanced nervously toward the ceiling dome. "We don't have much time. They've tracked it to this region." "They?" James backed away slightly. "Look, I don't want any trouble. Yet you've been seeking the extraordinary your entire life," Lyra countered, stepping closer. "Isn't that why you spend your nights alone, searching the stars while others sleep?" James couldn't deny it. His colleagues had mocked his theories about intelligent signals from beyond, but he'd persisted. Now this woman, this stranger with impossible knowledge, stood before him offering. "What exactly?" "I'm not from here, James," Lyra said quietly, holding his gaze. "The anomaly you've been tracking is my home system. That's over 2 million. Light years away," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "Distance is different for my people." She raised her hand into a shaft of starlight, and for a moment her skin shimmered with a subtle purple undertone. "My real name is Naya. You're claiming to be ... double quotes." James couldn't finish the sentence. "Not human." It's completed for him. At least not entirely. My world exists in a different spectrum of reality than yours. The crystal pulsed more urgently. Naya quickly grabbed it, closing her fingers around its light. The collectors have detected my signal. They've been pursuing me across 3 systems. Collectors. They harvest beings like me for the energy we contain. A shadow crossed her face. I came to Earth because your world exists partially outside their detection range. I thought I'd be safe here. James's scientific mind raced with questions. But the genuine fear in her eyes made him pause. What do you need from me? Sanctuary, for now. And perhaps... double quotes. She hesitated, your understanding. Before James could respond, the observatory lights flickered. Outside, the distinctive sound of helicopters broke the mountain silence. Naya's eyes widened. They're here already. She grabbed his hand. Do you have somewhere we can go? Somewhere shielded. The touch of her skin against his scent, an electric current up his arm, not painful, but intensely alive. In that moment of connection, James saw flashes of stars from impossible angles, felt the cold vastness of space, and somehow knew she was telling the truth. My cabin, he said, making a decision that would change everything. It's off-grid. In the valley below, they ran for the service exit as searchlights began sweeping the observatory. Ground's dawn broke over the mountain ridge as James led Naya through the forest path to his secluded cabin. The simple structure, built by his grandfather decades ago, stood nestled among ancient pines, nearly invisible from the main road. It's not much, James apologized, unlocking the weathered door. But no one knows about this place except me. Naya stepped inside, her gaze taking in the rustic interior, a small living area with a stone fireplace, bookshelves stuffed with scientific journals, and large windows that framed the forest. It's perfect, she whispered. Natural materials block certain scanning frequencies. James watched as she moved around the space, touching the wooden beams and stone walls with something like reverence. In the morning light, the violet undertone of her skin was more noticeable, not obvious enough to appear inhuman at first glance, but definitely unusual. You can rest here, he said, pointing to the small bedroom. I'll keep watch. Thank you, Naya, replied, her voice soft. She sat at the edge of the sofa instead, clutching the crystal that had dimmed significantly since they fled the observatory. I never meant to bring danger to your doorstep. James built a small fire to ward off the morning chill. You said these... collectors. They hunt your kind. Why? Naya's gaze drifted to the flames. My people evolved alongside yours, but in a different dimension that occasionally intersects with this one. We can manipulate energy in ways that seem impossible to human science, she demonstrated by lifting her hand toward the fire, causing the flames to shift and dance without touching them. The collectors discovered us centuries ago and realized our biological energy could power their technology. That's horrible, James said, genuinely disturbed. I was a scientist on my world like you, she continued. I was developing a shield against their detection methods when they breached our defenses. I escaped with my prototype, but they've been tracking me across star systems. James processed this information, his scientific skepticism battling with what his eyes had witnessed. The light anomaly I was studying... a ripple effect from my arrival, she confirmed. I didn't realize it would be detectable by your instruments. The day passed with James asking countless questions about her world, her biology, the physics that allowed interstellar travel. As evening approached, Naya seemed to grow more comfortable, even laughing at his more outlandish theories. When night fell, they sat side by side on the cabin's small porch, watching the stars emerge. Their shoulders touched, and that same electric sensation returned. Milder, but persistent. Your curiosity is remarkable, Naya observed. Most beings would be terrified. I am terrified, James admitted, but also fascinated. He turned to face her, suddenly aware of how close they were. I've spent my life looking for proof we're not alone. And now you're here. Naya's eyes, with their unusual violet depths, met his. Perhaps we found each other for a reason. The night breeze carried the scent of pine and something sweeter that seemed to emanate from her. In the darkness, her skin began to glow faintly, illuminating the space between them with a soft purple light. "Your world is beautiful," she whispered. "Different from mine, but beautiful in its solidity." James hesitated, then reached out to touch her luminescent cheek. "And yours must be extraordinary." The distant sound of engines shattered the moment. Naya stiffened, the glow instantly fading. "They're coming," she whispered. "They've found us." The engine sounds grew closer, echoing through the valley. James quickly doused the cabin lights, while Naya retrieved her crystal, which had begun pulsing with renewed urgency. "We need to move deeper into the forest," James whispered. Grabbing a backpack and stuffing it with essentials, "There's an old mining cave about a mile from here. The mineral deposits might help mask your energy signature." Naya nodded, her violet eyes reflecting fear and determination in equal measure. "James, if they catch us, she hesitated. "The collectors don't distinguish between targets and those who help them. I made my choice." When we left the observatory, he replied, checking the windows for approaching lights. "I'm not abandoning you now." They slipped out the back door and into the darkness, guided only by James's small flashlight and Naya's natural luminescence, which she struggled to suppress. The forest was dense with ancient trees, their massive trunks providing cover as helicopter spotlights swept overhead. After 20 minutes of tense hiking, they reached a small clearing where a stream cut through the forest floor. James paused to catch his breath. But Naya seemed hardly winded. "Your endurance is impressive," he observed. "Different atmospheric composition on my world," she explained. "Your oxygen-rich environment energizes me." She looked up through a break in the canopy, where stars were visible in the night sky. "That cluster those are the stars nearest to my home." James followed her gaze. "The ones I've been studying." "Not a coincidence," Naya said softly. "I was drawn to this region because of you, James. Your observations, your theories, they created a quantum resonance that guided my travel path." "You mean I called you here?" James asked, astonished. Naya stepped closer, her face illuminated by the subtle purple glow emanating from beneath her skin. "Minds that seek each other across the cosmos have ways of connecting," she said. "I sensed your consciousness reaching outward long before I arrived." The distant sound of dogs barking interrupted them. The collectors had brought trackers. "We need to keep moving," James urged. But Naya placed a hand on his arm. "Before we go further, you need to understand what's at stake," she said urgently. "If they capture me, they'll extract the coordinates to my homeworld. Millions will suffer. I won't let that happen," James promised. Naya's expression softened. "There's something else." She opened her hand to reveal the crystal, now pulsing with a complex pattern of lights. "This isn't just a beacon. It's a way home for both of us, if you choose." James stared at the crystal, understanding dawning. "You're asking me to leave Earth?" "When the time comes, yes," she admitted. "My world would welcome your knowledge, your perspective, and double quotes, she hesitated, vulnerability showing through her otherworldly composure. "I would welcome your companionship." The confession hung in the air between them, weighted with implications both cosmic and deeply personal. James reached out, covering her hand and the crystal with his own. The contact sent waves of sensation through him, images of crystalline cities suspended in violet skies, of beings moving through dimensions like stepping through doorways, of a universe far more vast and interconnected than he'd ever imagined. "I've never belonged here," he whispered, realizing the truth as he spoke it. "Not really." Naya's free hand rose to touch his face, her fingers tracing his features with gentle curiosity. "Perhaps because part of you always knew there was somewhere else you were meant to be, under the canopy of Earth's familiar stars." With danger closing in around them, their lips met in a kiss that transcended worlds tender at first. Then deepening with the intensity of two souls, recognizing something essential in each other, the moment was broken by a spotlight sweeping dangerously close to their position, the cave. James whispered urgently, "We need to reach it before dawn." Hand in hand, they plunged deeper into the forest. The mining cave's entrance was almost invisible, obscured by decades of overgrown vegetation. James pushed aside the tangled vines, revealing a narrow opening that widened into darkness. The geological surveys found high concentrations of rare earth metals in these caves, he explained as they entered. That's why I thought it might shield us. Naya moved deeper into the cave, her natural luminescence providing enough light to navigate. The walls around them glittered with embedded minerals, reflecting her purple glow in countless pinpoints like miniature stars. You were right, she said, relief evident in her voice. The electromagnetic properties of these formations are disrupting their tracking systems. She placed her hand against a particularly dense cluster of crystals, and her own light seemed to synchronize with them momentarily. James watched, fascinated. It's responding to you. All matter contains energy patterns, Naya explained. My people learned to read and influence these patterns millennia ago. She turned to him with sudden urgency. Which means I can create a diversion, something to lead them away, while we prepare for my departure. The word departure hung heavily between them. James felt his chest tighten. How much time do we have? Naya examined her crystal beacon. The alignment I need occurs in 3 hours. If I miss it, I'll be stranded here for another full lunar cycle, and the collectors will never stop hunting during that time. James, sat on a stone outcropping, processing everything. If I stay, what happens to me? They'll question you, probe your memories for information about me, she answered honestly. Once they determine you have nothing of value, they'll likely alter your memories and release you. And if I go with you? Naya's expression softened. A new world, new science beyond your imagining. Challenges, certainly adaptation, to different physical laws, different social structures. She hesitated. And me, if you want that. The cave fell silent except for the distant drip of water. Outside, the sounds of the search party had faded, diverted by Naya's manipulation of the energy fields. I have no family left, James said quietly. My research is discredited. There's little keeping me here except familiarity, he looked up at her. But the idea of leaving everything, my species, my planet, tits terrifying. Naya knelt before him, taking his hands in hers. In the purple-tinged darkness, her eyes held depths he could get lost in forever. Fear is natural when standing at the threshold of transformation. But I've seen your mind, James, your curiosity, your hunger for understanding. These are the same qualities my people value. Above all else, their connection had deepened. Beyond words in the short time, they'd known each other, a recognition that transcended their biological differences. Show me, he whispered. Show me what it would be like. Naya placed her hands on either side of his face. And suddenly, James was immersed in visions of her world-floating archipelagos of crystal and living matter, beings of light and substance moving through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Knowledge recorded in the very fabric of reality rather than in books or computers. And through it all, a sense of belonging he'd never experienced on Earth. When the vision faded, tears streaked his cheeks. It's beautiful. It could be yours, she said softly. Ours. James stood and walked to the cave entrance. The first light of dawn was breaking over the mountains. His mountains. His Earth, the only home he'd ever known. Behind him, Naya's crystal began to pulse with increasing intensity. The alignment is beginning, she said. I have to decide now. James turned back to her, his decision made. How do we do this? Naya's face brightened with joy. She held out the crystal between them. Place your hands with mine. Open your mind completely. The transition requires absolute trust. As their fingers intertwined around the pulsing crystal, the cave filled with spiraling light. The walls around them seemed to thin, reality itself becoming permeable. Are you certain? Naya asked one last time. James looked into her violet eyes and felt the last of his doubts fade away. I've spent my life searching the stars, he said. It's time to walk among them. Their forms began to shimmer as the crystal's energy enveloped them. Outside, the collectors would find an empty cave, mysterious energy readings, and no trace of their quarry. The scientist who had vanished would become another unsolved mystery. While James and Naya began their journey across the cosmos, two beings from different worlds who had found, against all odds, that the universe's greatest discovery was each other. As the cave filled with blinding light, their physical forms dissolved into patterns of pure energy, ready to be rewritten in the distant violet skies of Nea's home world.